AJ, thanks for joining me today. Excited to chat with you. A lot of fun stuff to discuss and tell your SMU story to our audience. If you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself to those who don't know you already.
Yeah, appreciate it. Excited to be here. I'm AJ Krow, class of 2013. I always have to check myself on that. Still live here in Dallas, and excited to be here and talk to you.
Getting old, man. You're passing that 10-year. Once you get past that 10-year, it always
Yeah,
you kind of round up to those big numbers, right? 10, 15, 20 when
I
you're
did the
out of
same
school.
thing. You do the same thing with kids, where they're either 6
Exactly.
months all the way up until they get to a year, and then it just
Right.
becomes and a half and a half and a half. Yeah.
That's where it's going. But like we mentioned, a lot of fun stuff to talk to you about from your career and all the things you have going on. I like to start kind of from the beginning though. You're from Nashville. What was your origin story to SMU? How'd you find the school and ultimately decide that's where you were going to go spend your 4 years of undergrad?
Yeah, man. Probably a more unique story than you're used to. I'd actually never heard of SMU until probably April of my senior year of high school. I was under the misguided notion that I'd be able to go play Ivy League football
Mhm.
or NESAC or something like that, and then reality set in, and nobody ever nobody ever took me aside and said, "Hey, that is not likely." And so I was left with, I'd gotten into Tennessee, I'd gotten into a couple of Belmont, a couple other schools. I was where I, similar to probably a lot of SMU people, is I did not get into Vandy. Got waitlisted there even with the connection to the admissions office. So
Yeah.
here I was sitting here in spring of senior year of high school. Everybody's got locked in. They're submitting
Mhm.
their colleges for graduation and everything. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do here. I do not want to go to Tennessee. I don't want to go to Belmont. I want to go somewhere else and branch out. My brother was living in Plano at the time and was working here, and said, man, I should have told you to apply to SMU. And I didn't know much about it at all. Hadn't really heard about it. And he just said, dude, the campus is incredible. You'll love it. And so I just emailed the admissions office with my resume and scores and everything, and just said, hey, I don't know if this is possible, but can I apply? And they said, yeah, go, here's an application.
Let's
Go
go.
ahead and let's do it. Then I found out when I got here and moved in. So I
That
never,
was sight unseen. That was just
sight unseen, never
your brother
had
did.
not been to
You just trusted
campus.
your brother that he knew you well enough to say
I
this is
trusted my
it's worth a
brother.
shot.
Exactly. I trusted my brother. He said it was great, and campus was great. And then I come to find out that he had never actually seen the campus at all. I guess he just seen a picture of it or whatever.
Right,
He
met
was
some people.
correct. And so yeah, so I apply, I got in, and then I didn't set foot on campus until orientation or Arrow or whatever
Yeah.
they called it at the time. And so yeah, that was probably, I don't know, late May, like right a little bit after I think I graduated from high school.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah,
So you're thinking
that's my
I'm
story.
I'm moving to Dallas. If this doesn't pan out, I can always come back home or something like that. I knew I wanted to get out of the state at least to try it, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
assume you walked on campus and you were sold, or did it take a little
It
bit longer?
No, it was pretty immediate. Yeah, obviously, like, you go walk on campus, and even, in 2009, we maybe had one or two less fountains and a couple less
Mhm.
buildings, but it's an unbelievable campus.
Right.
And then moving into, I was in Bo's freshman year, and my brother helped me move in, and we go in, and, we're looking, and you see the names and stuff, and he's like, "Wait, it's just co-ed? You guys just live right
Crazy.
next door to girls?" And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess that's what we're doing here. So yeah, it was pretty easy. And then I started working immediately as an intramural ref. Had
Nice.
to pay those bills. But yeah,
Totally.
man, it was all sight unseen. It was talking about a leap of faith, and boy, did that work out. So glad glad my brother lied to me enough to
Definitely.
get me in here.
No, I love that. So, I mean, you don't come in knowing I want to be in the Cox School or I want to do journalism or some of the other majors that SMU is known for. You're a sports guy. It sounds at heart. That was
Yeah.
kind of where your mind was. What was kind of the mentality coming into school? You mentioned you started to work. I don't even did we have our sports management program at that time? And did you were you just kind of a blank canvas of like, "Hey,
Yeah.
let's see what there is," or what
Yeah,
kind of
that's
enticed you out the gate?
yeah, blank canvas is a good way of putting it. So I'm one of the very few people that loved econ. I had a
Mhm.
great econ teacher in high school. And so I got started out with that as a, potentially as a foundation there. Um, what I didn't realize was, well, so obviously econ wasn't in Cox, but then I don't think it would have made much of a difference. I had some fun early on,
Mhm.
I'll claim it's because I was working too much, so my grades
There you
suffered
go.
a little bit.
There
But
you go.
it was pretty clear early on that probably wasn't going to be much of an option there. So I went econ, and which was great. Again, I happen to really like it. I'm one of those
Yeah,
weird ones, and I'm a huge believer foundationally that econ should have a much stronger presence in everybody's education, just as a way to teach. Everything comes down to supply and demand at the end of the day,
totally.
and so there's a lot of principles there that I think could be really valuable for people. But I know everybody's different. But no, so I wasn't in Cox, and had I went the econ route, a little bit of
Totally.
Spanish, and that was it. But I didn't really have much feel. I still thought potentially that I would wind up coaching, getting into
Well, yeah,
coaching. And so I worked in the recruiting office for a little bit, just like interning in the recruiting office for a little bit, but then figured out pretty quickly, hey, it's gonna be a long road there, and so
yeah.
didn't wind up doing that. But just try to do a
That's a
bunch
whole
of
'nother
different stuff.
story for those people who put their head down
For
and make it
sure,
that way.
for
What
sure.
did you know about SMU athletics coming in? Did you do a fast track, like, catch up to speed and go over the history of
Yeah,
you talked about going to Tennessee and some of these big SEC schools that have sports.
yeah,
'09, where our football team at least is making a bowl game here and
yeah.
winning some games, and I forget if Larry Brown's he's not quite
It
there
was
yet.
right at no, it was right
Hopefully, he makes
after.
a turn. It's like, are you kinda just
Yeah,
like, "Where am I going? What do I
yeah.
have
So it
school-wise?"
was you can do obviously you do the easy, the quick search and
Yep,
everything, and could get a feel for, you brush up on the Pony Express stuff, you get a feel
mhm,
for everything else that's going on. It was an interesting time. I got but we weren't really going to games that often. It's still, I mean, shoot, up until the last couple of years, it really just
totally,
wasn't in the culture. And no one grew up an SMU fan. So
exactly.
in our at least when I was there, so we're part of that generation that's first generation fans, so to speak. So
Mhm,
it was we and we love sports. My group of friends, we love sports. We would go to basketball games more than we would go to football games. But
mhm,
the tough part is after freshman year it became really difficult. So where do you park? Where do you how do you, it wasn't super easy,
mhm,
and I didn't wind up doing a fraternity. We were still second semester rush at that time. So a lot of those built-in mechanisms to
right,
to get you in, to get you on the boulevard and stuff. I went to the boulevard for the first game, and then I didn't go to the boulevard again until I started dating my now wife senior year.
wow.
So, and definitely not your average SMU experience.
So what were some of your best memories at SMU, right? You mentioned you obviously enjoyed econ. You've made some great friends. You were busy freshman year that maybe you had to catch up on some schoolwork. What were kind of some of those things that you would look back on fondly that helped shape you, and some of those things you'd tell those folks looking at SMU as a potential school opportunity that you liked and always cherished.
Yeah, there's obviously so much more now that we didn't get to experience when we were there, but overall, I think SMU's a really cool atmosphere because sure, there's a lot of there's a decent amount of Dallas. There's a
Mhm.
lot of Texas. There's a lot of people from other areas, which I'm such a huge believer in. At some point in your life, go be uncomfortable somewhere, whether it's move somewhere different for college, move
Mhm.
somewhere for work, somewhere you don't know. Get that experience of being someone new and having to make friends and fight that, because so many of us grow up in the same place. You have your same friends from the time you're in elementary school. So that part, and I think that's a broader Dallas thing too, that
Mhm.
there's so many people from other places that have moved here. And so it's a really unique experience and a cool experience to be able to do that. And you get people from a lot of different backgrounds. So my core group of friends at SMU, one of them was from Germany, a couple were from Chicago. We had Houston, had a lot from South America, Latin America. We were just all over the place, which was really cool. And that's a unique experience that I don't think you get to find too many places. And it's weird because you don't really feel it, I guess, until you graduate and come back. I didn't realize at the time that I was going to a school that was smack dab in the middle of the Park
Right.
Cities, one of the nicest places in the country. At that time, I couldn't afford to go do anything really around there. I had to move way, way, way off campus to be able to afford it. But it's such a it's at times it can be a bizarre experience if you're truly an outside from a completely different environment.
Mhm.
I was one of the few public school kids there, but not like I grew up in a real rough and tumble area by any means. But it's cool to be able to experience a totally different environment with, I was used to school of 1,500 kids.
Right.
A lot of the people I met there were, they went to school with 15, right? It's a
Mhm.
totally different
Mhm.
experience. So getting to meet an entirely different group of people, everybody from a different background, was a really, really cool experience that I thought was really valuable. Obviously, the most important and best memory I have is meeting my wife there, and
Good answer.
yeah, and in being able to start our experience there, and for us to have that shared connection to be able to give back to and be connected with, and we still have a lot of great friends there. So it's just the best memory I have of the school overall, outside of winning a couple intramural championships and things like that, that obviously were keys and that I still hold close to me, was just being able to experience a totally unique environment that just doesn't exist really anywhere else.
Yeah, you touch on, I think, a theme and something we talk about a lot on here is it is this unique campus that's a college town inside of a massive city that has a pull on a community from all over the world to attend there. So you get kind of so many factors that you piece from, like, if I could build the dream college, what would it be? SMU gets a lot of those ingredients.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of weave into this theme throughout your story, you being an entrepreneur. What is it about the people you've met there and kind of what's created and encourages SMU that kind of leads to so many entrepreneurs and business leaders being built uh, with the SMU, degree?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I've got a unique experience when it comes to understanding the power of the SMU's network and the people, because you didn't do a fraternity. I didn't really make much of an effort
Mhm.
to tap into that. Wasn't in Cox. Yeah, I was just econ. Like econ, we kind of just like floated around above Humphrey Lee, and we weren't really a part of much of anything.
Yeah.
And so I lived, basically 10, 12 years after I graduated, thinking that that network, really all that network meant was just, well, if you were in a fraternity, it was helpful. What I've figured out since then, really since we started getting more involved in SMU, is it's a network and group of people that actually want to help
Mhm.
and are always it's I would say the most accessible group of really successful people that you'll probably ever be around. Meaning we've got obviously some very recognizable names there, and they're all, at least from my experience, and I think a lot of people share the same thing, is they're yeah, it's when you reach out to them, you get a response like fairly quickly, which is a rare thing, right? Most people, we've all worked with people who are too busy to be able to get back to somebody, and it's like,
Right.
well, no, you just didn't want to. But it's a group that, like I said, is it because it's such a small group, which is crazy. It's what most people outside of SMU don't realize. And we see it in sports all the time, and people trying to clown on SMU because for our stadium size and things like that. Like, well, when I was there, it was 5,500 kids, so we're never going to be a 50,000 student population. But the cool thing there is there's actual real connection. It's almost like a little bit of a filter where, all right, if you're in there, it's there's not that many of us, so we got to stick
Yeah.
together.
Well, that's
And
a
then,
good
like you
point.
mentioned, Dallas is an unbelievable city from a resource standpoint. So it's everybody's fairly close, and that proximity piece is massive. And so, in the entrepreneurial world, or whether you're finding a job, whatever it may be, it's just the fact that you can be close from a proximity standpoint, but also have that connection is almost impossible to find anywhere else.
Definitely. So you're econ, you're floating above Humphrey McGee. You mentioned the importance of supply and demand and kind of everyone's background. What led you to a career in produce distribution? Were there other things you were looking at? Was I know you kind of mentioned that a life in sports can be a little more challenging from like you said, you got a serious girlfriend or the things you want to achieve in life. It can be a tough grind. Walk us through a little bit of what you were thinking of as school was wrapping up about a potential career, and then ultimately led you to maybe the perfect econ job, uh, pricing produce and kind of natural goods for one of the largest companies in that space in the United States.
Yeah, so when I was coming out, I had really so my wife and I met, our first date was Halloween of our senior year.
All
And so we
right,
had been dating for
she didn't know what you look like, I guess.
we so we were in that mode of like, all right, because originally it's a high possibility I was going to move back to Nashville.
Yep.
And so I had that extra piece where, we knew we were serious. What was it? Are we staying here? Am I potentially going there? And so I was looking at really the two areas that I was looking at was, uh, my dad's whole career was in payment services. And so I had that as an option looking into and had a
Mhm.
lot of opportunities there. So it's basically looking at that or looking at my brother was working at Fresh Point at the time, and that wasn't a priority for me to go there because he was there. But the more I started talking about it was this was an industry that was pretty old,
Yeah.
meaning, most people don't grow up thinking, man, I want to be in the produce business one day if that's not in the family DNA.
Mhm.
And so the more and more I looked at the different opportunities, it was all right, here's an opportunity right in Dallas. Here's the leadership that was at the time was a big change over there, bringing in some younger people, new blood, so to speak, and had leadership there that was looking to bring on somebody that could make a real difference, learn the business, and be able to help bring things into the more modern age. Even though it was owned by Sysco, largest food service distribution company in the world, it was still a pretty old company. And so that
Yeah, give us
opportunity is
give us the little high level of Fresh Point.
yeah,
What are
so
they
Fresh
doing?
Point
Kind
was
of.
a fresh produce distribution company, and so basically, what started out as a couple companies in Florida. Basically, it's just a giant roll up strategy, right? Which
Right.
was go out and scale and find acquisitions in other markets and be able to fly one flag and be able to get your economies of scale that way. So it was a great company. It's a brutal industry. It's not that much fun because there's very little time off, and holidays and everything for the most part you're working, but it was an opportunity to be able to learn quickly, move up quickly, and like I said, it was in Dallas in a really safe industry.
Mhm.
There wasn't gonna be much done that was gonna impact it, and so it turned out with I had 3 or 4 opportunities that I was looking at, and that one just turned out to be a good decision, but it was the right decision at the time.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it sounds like you got to wear a bunch of hats in a big organization, over $1 billion in sales. Like you're seeing big business. You
Yeah.
can't ask for much more right out of school. What um what about that industry kind of surprised you? Maybe early on that you took from the classroom to application that was kind of either shockingly good, shockingly bad, and is there anything in that industry that still you think is an opportunity for change? I know we're going to keep getting into your mindset and your entrepreneurial kind of thought process. Was where does that landscape sit in produce distribution? Is it still kind of one way forever? That's how it's going to work. Are there some technological advances that could we could see that could be improving that business model?
Yeah, so the theme stuck with me really throughout my career, which is find something where other people aren't looking.
Mhm.
At that time, everybody's going into it's very attractive to go into to finance, to go into now anything AI related, SaaS businesses, things like that.
Mhm.
Very trendy. Obviously, it's at the forefront of everybody. Like I said, nobody grows up wanting to get into produce. And so what I what I saw there was an opportunity just from a selfish standpoint, right? All right, I know I can do a VLOOKUP in Excel And so I'm already automatically basically a wizard to a lot of people that work there. And it's just so, archaic, but it's a
Yeah.
lot of, again, this was a lot of family companies, right? So within a family run company, usually a successful family run company, for the most part, you're going to find usually good revenue numbers, bad expense numbers,
Right.
and kind of a lack of fiscal discipline.
Yeah.
Not to paint with too broad of a brush, but that was the
Yeah. Yeah.
situation in basically every single operating company that eventually became a freshman company. So we were able to, just from a competition standpoint, it was very limited, right? I was able to move up from. There's not many industries you can go from basically first job to VP of sales for a $250 million operating company within, 6, 7 years. And so it really wasn't that much competition from
Yeah.
a talent standpoint, which was great. Now, the industry itself, like I said, it's not glamorous, it's not fun, it's not sexy, and it's a grind kind of culture.
Mhm.
We I would have, when I left Fresh Point, part of the reason that I wanted to leave was I would have a window of basically Saturday evening at about 6 p.m. to Sunday at about 10:30 a.m. where I had actual peace.
Oh my
Meaning
gosh.
we weren't delivering, we weren't going to be short on stuff, we weren't just because it's
Jeez.
such a 24/7 job for the most
Yeah.
part, because that night shift comes there, or overnight selectors, they come in, they get started all night, and those trucks get out at 2, 3 in the morning. So it's not for everybody, but there's a huge amount of opportunity just because, again, we look at supply and demand, going back to that, right? There are not enough people coming into the industry to be able to support the huge amount of people that are going to be getting ready to retire.
Mm.
So it was great to be able to learn in a still a very, even though we were a large company overall and had the support of a large company, it still had a lot of the same family principles where, you had to get processes in place. I had to create a lot of this stuff on my own.
Mhm.
There was no sales training program. There was no, there was not a lot of tracking going on. So I had to create all that. And it wound up giving me a really good perspective and a really well-rounded skill set that's helped me a lot now.
I love that. I mean, you mentioned the grind. Sounds like you're married at this point, and it's time. You put your 7 years in. Was the next step thinking through kind of what you just explained? You're well balanced. You know everything from sales, from acquisitions to management, operations. Was it I want to go buy a business? What was kind of the next
It
step
the
philosophy?
the next step got me to want to go buy a business. So I was looking around. I knew for about a year, and I always thought I wanted to get into a private company, smaller
Mhm.
company, more dynamic,
Mhm.
things like that. That didn't have the same restrictions and limitations that a public company does. And so I finally found a great opportunity that was a perfect fit for my skill set. Was going to go take over as GM for DFW for an on-demand hospitality staffing
Mm.
Series A company. So smaller company, pay was, it was equity component. It was an
Yeah,
upside deal.
potential.
Potential, yeah, and, I actually took less on my base salary because I was in love with the opportunity and thought it was a
Yeah.
great fit. It was a great next step, and so I left. I'm very comfortable, just had my long-term stock incentives kick in and all that
Mm.
good stuff, and said goodbye, and, put my notice in, and was ready to move on to the next step of that company. The only problem was that was, I think March 12th of 2020,
Uh-oh.
and, and so I'd gotten a call from the founder of the company over the weekend saying, "Hey, just a heads up, we're good. We've got 6 months runway in cash reserves." COVID was starting to become a real thing. The market had started tanking, but it wasn't.
Mhm.
The Rudy Gobert incident hadn't happened yet, which we all look at as at least what I look at as the official start
That's hilarious.
of that fiasco. And so I got that assurance. I'm in at Fresh Point finishing out. I think my last day was on a Wednesday actually. And so Monday, Tuesday, my boss at the time, who was phenomenal. I got very lucky. I'd say my biggest tip that I can give anybody, and we'll probably come back to this, is find somebody great to
Yeah.
work for that will
Yeah.
help carry you through. I was very lucky for them. So he was saying to me, Monday and Tuesday, he was like, "Hey, are you sure? Like, are you going to be okay there? Like, work, you can you can stay. Like, nothing's finalized yet.
Mhm.
I was like, nah, man, we're good. I talked to the CEO, man, we're good. He said, we're all squared away. They had
Mm.
their term sheets and everything. They were all good. And, so Wednesday, last day, celebrate, say goodbye to everybody, go put our daughter down, who was 3 months old at the time, and put her down for bed. My wife and I were ready to pop the champagne. I see I had a missed call, and it was, uh, from that city, and CEO says, "Hey, I can't believe we have to do this, but basically all our term sheets fell out. We're gonna have to pull out of the
Okay.
market altogether." So here I am. I'm leaving my path was set. Like, I
Yeah.
knew exactly what my next step was going to be at Fresh
Yep.
Point. I knew I would maybe have to move, but, like,
Yeah.
whatever. And so my dream job goes away like that, and I've got a 3-month-old sitting at home, that we had just put down, and so we're like, what the heck are we gonna do next?
So where do you
So
go for support like that? I think I was gonna stop. I'm just like, you're 7 years at a company. Is that like someone you have a mentor that you're talking to about when you're leaving? Is that just you and your wife talking about these options? Is it
Mhm.
just playing it out in your head? Like, because I know there's going to be a ton of people listening who are multi-year into a career. It's not that they don't like their job, but they maybe see something else they want to do. But it's so hard sometimes to leave a job. Like,
Yeah.
did you have someone you could talk through that with? It sounds like you had a great boss that you could be honest with, but
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something I'd say is we weave in some tips for people. Is That's when it really crystallized for me. Like, I went to SMU, which has this incredible network.
uh
I didn't do anything to invest into that to try and get a feel for what that really looked like. So that, because that's like, if that's not the time that you tap your network, like, I don't know what is.
right.
And I realized pretty quickly, like, shoot, I got nothing. Right? I have
Mhm.
people in the produce world, but, like, they were on a hiring freeze. Nobody was doing anything there. I didn't
Yeah.
want to go back to that industry anyway.
How
And
hard would
so
you think if you would have stayed during COVID, how hard would the hours would have been in COVID in the pub? It's probably like 20 times more, right?
so it's easy to look back and say everything happened for a reason, but it really did. It's easy to say that because things worked out, but I'll tell you, man, it would have been horrific. Like,
Right.
it was they were, I obviously stayed in touch with them and everything, and
Yeah.
would see what they were doing on social media. It would have been miserable. So we were really fortunate to be able to, I was able to take that time, and we
Yeah.
kind of looked at this as, hey, this may be my only shot to be able to spend time at home and,
Mhm. Mhm.
and watch my daughter grow up and be there
Right.
for those really important times. And so, but doing that over again, man, it would have been really nice to be able to call a couple people up and say,
Right.
hey, this just happened. What do you guys have? Now, we kind of thought that was going to be maybe a 1 to 2, 3 month kind of thing. We didn't think
Mhm.
that it was basically going to be a real protracted time off, but
Right.
it was, it was, you asked me, do you have a mentor or anything like that? I didn't have anybody, it was my wife and I, we worked together, and she's always been incredible at every step,
Mhm.
saying, I trust you, you do what's right, what you feel like is the best. And, and it was what we thought was a terrible decision, really wound up being the best thing to possibly happen for us, because it also put me on that trajectory to say, all right, I don't want to be in this situation anymore where I'm relying on anybody else. And so that's when the process started of really starting to crystallize. All right, I got to go find something on my own to be able
Mm.
to truly call my own.
I love it. And it was walk us through was it always buying a business that had revenue, that had some legs to it, or was it, "Maybe I'll start something," kinda how did you play out the
Yeah,
decision
good
tree?
question. Good question. And it's a hot topic. If anybody's on social media, especially on X, and I guess a little bit on LinkedIn too, the SMB, the ETA world it's a big topic. Do you start? Do you buy? Whatever. There's a lot of BS out there right now. There's a
Mhm.
lot of people just trying to sell courses on stuff.
Right, right.
Like, I would say, don't, if you see something that appeals to you on social media in that world, like, reach out to me and ask. Like, I'll help you filter through this stuff. But it would, I don't really have much of a skill set to be able to start it. I can't say, like, all right, I'm gonna go code my way into, an app to start or something like that. Like,
Right. There's some
I knew
idea that you knew you had to bring to life now.
yeah, yeah, like, it just wasn't I know my own weaknesses pretty well, and, like, I'm generally look
That's a
for,
skill.
is there a shortcut here that I can take to get there? And so, I started really honing in on, "Alright, I wanna find something to buy." Started to figure out a buy box. I did wind up joining a mastermind group, and
Mhm.
there was some BS in there for sure, but it also was really helpful to be able to at least start to craft what I needed to look for,
Cool.
and, so that was it was a long process, man. If people out there are trying to say like, "Oh, you just go buy a business for no money down and blah blah blah," like that's not realistic. Like it takes a
Yeah.
long time. Over, I would say start to finish, it took me close to 2 years to
Wow.
find the right opportunity, and partly because the the buy box changes, you start to narrow down more, you start to have more conversations with sellers, you start to have a little more discerning eye of what you're looking for.
So,
And
does that
so
start
yeah.
with, like, AJ's box of things that he likes, and then it morphs into what's available to, like how does that whiteboard session go?
Yeah. So just to try it and help anybody out and speed the process up a little bit. A lot of people will say like, "Oh, be industry agnostic," right?
Yeah.
Look for the fundamentals, all that kind of stuff. That becomes really difficult because then you're just wasting your time. You're looking at too much stuff.
Mm.
So I started figuring out, what was my general skill set, right? My skill set was I've got a pretty well-rounded background here. I
Mhm.
know sales, I know ops, I know finance. I can figure out pretty much anything in terms of, business is business at the end of
Right.
the day. But then I started look back on my career, started looking at the landscape, say, okay, what is quote unquote safe? Meaning, what is something that I'm not going to constantly have to be on the vanguard, or something that's going to be like I would have conversations with sellers about businesses
Mhm.
that 6 months later were toast. Like they were like one specifically that I even
Right.
put an offer in on. I look back on now, this was a couple years ago. I look back on now and think like that business ain't gonna make it because the entire thing could be replaced by AI immediately
Right.
because we had so
Right.
many huge advances. So I started to hone in on, all right, I wanted something that was going to be B2B based. I wanted it to be, someone in a service or trade industry. And a lot of that, like the stuff people talk about now is like, oh, you find boring businesses. Like, first of all, it's wildly insulting to call something boring business, but just like
Yeah.
it's a, I call it trade-based businesses. There's a lot to
Yeah.
like, there's a lot not to like, but I knew it wanted to be something, again, going back to why I started with Fresh Point, is I wanted to go where, a lot of people weren't looking.
Mhm.
And so I started to narrow down to my geography. I knew it needed to be either in DFW or Oklahoma, where my wife was from, or in Nashville, where I was from, because I needed to have some network to be able to tap into, or some
Yep.
reason, right?
Yep.
And so once I started narrowing that down, I started eventually found, and you work with brokers, you work with, you look through the biz buy sells of the world, and found one that was really interesting. It was nothing like what most people will tell you to buy. Like everybody
Mm.
talks about, you know, 10 plus employees, 1 to 10 million revenue, management in place, blah, blah, blah. Like that's BS. That person is not selling. If
Mm.
that company exists, that guy makes, or girl makes more money every year than what you're going to pay them for the business. And
Right.
so I found one that was basically like an anomaly. It was horrible from a buy box perspective. Owner did everything. It was all subcontractor based, and it was snow removal and ice control in the winter and pressure washing in the summer.
Mm.
But it was really interesting because I thought, all right, where can we add value? Like that's pretty easy, right? It was, wasn't much of a web presence. They weren't doing anything on social media. Got a lot of opportunities. It's pretty easy to scale. And so, but it was simple, and that's what I wanted. And so that negotiation process all in took 11 months
Wow.
from, initial LOI to actually closing on the business. And so it was lengthy, but it's been a great decision. It's been a lot of fun
And
so
when did
far.
you guys ultimately close?
We closed that actually June 1st of 2023.
Okay.
And then I actually, almost 2 years to the day, actually just bought it because he had retained within that. But part of it was him retaining an equity component and rights to future distributions and stuff. And so I actually just completed the buyout of that piece of it last Thursday, so almost 2 years to the day. So
Nice, congrats.
it's been a fun ride so far.
So the business is OPW Commercial Services,
Yeah.
Texas and Oklahoma
Yep.
operations, right? Give us a little
Yeah.
elevator pitch about what you guys do. Maybe some, like you mentioned, the things you've been able to add on and do
Yeah.
successfully in these 2 years.
Yeah. So I knew as soon as I bought it, I needed to set it up, for lack of a better term, like a real business, right? So it was instead of just, I didn't want the business to depend on me,
Mhm.
and I wanted it to be able to set ourselves up to be able to grow and grow fast when we were ready. So we had some really great commercial contracts that were locked in that gave me the opportunity to really take my time with it, which was great.
Mhm.
And so we hired a remote ops manager, handle a lot of the back office stuff. Started looking at what different opportunities did we have, and really the main turning point was in January. I hired uh, my general manager, who was, I mean, talk about fate. Like, I could not have gotten luckier to have gotten him on board, and since then it's been a rocket ship, which is great.
Awesome.
We're now up to we just had an offer letter accepted for area manager in Tulsa, so we're going to be up to 6 team members plus a stable of partners that we use to help fulfill work. But we are, instead of when I bought it, going from just a snow removal and pressure washing company, we now have what we call 6 core services and line items that we are growing. We've got opportunities that come on board that we didn't even know existed,
Wow.
in 2 months ago. And so we basically can do anything that commercial properties need.
Okay.
Our primary focus is exterior, but we do have the ability to do interior as well, interior cleanouts, things like that. But our main focus is exterior wise. So landscaping, pressure washing, concrete work, lot striping, pressure washing. We do a lot of work with parking garages and large format commercial, large format retail. And we're just a partner. We've got the ability, we do random things like, we just finished or we're finishing up a dog shade structure
Oh,
for the
cool.
city of Owasso. We're doing a lot of
Yeah.
municipal work. We're doing a lot of large fence projects, things like that. And so it's been a lot of fun to see the revenue take off, but also
Yeah.
just the ability to create an environment
Mhm.
that is really cool, and we're starting to build a really cool culture here. And we're hoping to eventually next year. The plan is to take it from North Texas and Oklahoma, start to go into southern Kansas, Arkansas, and then start moving our way across the Southeast
Amazing.
and continue to grow. So it's been a lot of fun.
So those SMU alumni who own commercial properties, they need to make sure they link up anything they need, their building related wise. OPW is gonna take care of them, right?
100%. And we're going to be, look, our selling point, you can find anybody that can go do any of the individual things that we do.
Yeah.
We're not blind to that, right? But our main value add to our clients is, instead of having to go get if you've got a parking garage, for instance, like your parking garage is a mess, like most of them are.
Yeah.
Instead of having to go call a lot striper, coordinate that with your pressure wash guy, coordinate that with your concrete guy to be able to get your ballards straight and get those painted and everything like that, like, you just call us, right? We handle everything. So we handle everything soup to nuts on any exterior work that you need. And the key there is because if you're going to manage 5, 6, 7 different trades, or you're going to manage 5, 6, 7 different companies, like, first of all, it's going to be difficult getting them all on the same schedule. It's going to be
Mhm.
difficult getting them to work together. It's going to be difficult and just finding the time to be able to handle that. That's 5 or 6 different invoices. Like, we take all that on for you, and we're able to get all that coordinated and do all that work for you, and be able to also, you bundle your purchasing power that way too, from a
Yeah.
customer standpoint. So it's great. We love it. We're having a lot of fun, and we're able to make a big impact on a lot of customers. We do Walmart, we do Academy, we do like I
Great.
said, City of Owasso, Tulsa Transit Authority. Here we've done a lot with in Deep Ellum. We just finished up a parking garage and down there, full 7.5 story. We call it a full bath and restripe the entire thing. And so we take on, really big projects and be able to execute on time, on budget, and just make your life easier.
Incredible. You mentioned expanding geographies and kind of growing that route.
Yeah.
Sounds like you'll continue to kind of build out the suite of services you provide based on what
Mhm.
the customers need, and kind of again creating that single, uh, you know, offering within OPW. What is it? Are we still looking at acquiring businesses, or is it kind of advantageous add-ons to OPW? Or you kinda
Yeah.
where's the long-term vision for, what you're trying to do as a business
Yeah.
owner?
I'm my theory's always been to be careful about going in with too much of a box. Like I said, everyone's got that buy box and it can become too broad, or you get so hung up on what are these, I got to chase this. I said I was going to do this, so I got to go this route, right? I've gone back and forth on, like, does growth by acquisition make sense? Like, sure, if I could find the perfect one,
Right.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But then also we've developed a couple other strategies within the business and developed a little bit of a roadmap here where, yes, if you acquire a great company and it all works out perfectly, it's the best cheat code there is to
Mhm.
growth. But you got to find that company. That company has to be willing to sell. That company has to be an ethical company with ethical owners, to where you don't have to worry about them immediately trashing their non-compete and going and
Yeah.
taking, eating your lunch in your own backyard. You don't have to
Mhm.
worry about employees that are going to say, "Hey, peace, I'm out." Right? That's happened so much. And so we've started to figure out a little bit of a roadmap for us that we'll take into new markets that works, that we feel good about, to where if we find a great, somebody that we partner with, for instance, that says, "Hey, I got to get out. Like, I'm done." Sure, we're going to look at that. Or if there's a market specifically that requires that, then we'll look at it. But I kind of also look at it as, man, I got real lucky on this first one, and do I really want to tempt fate again?
Right.
So we're always going to look at great opportunities that come up, but chasing growth for the sake of growth in another market, that's a really, really dicey proposition. And so we feel good about the opportunity that we have within the markets that we already are. And, we've got ways that we can insulate ourselves within this industry, that there's not a lot of barriers to entry, but
Yeah.
we feel pretty good about those and continuing to figure out how we create that moat and make it bigger and bigger. So yeah, I mean, hey, if anybody that's listening or watching to this knows a phenomenal company that meets that wants to make a real sweetheart deal with me, absolutely, I'll look at it. But we're gonna take it one step at a time, man. We've got so much opportunity within the area that we already are, that we can't believe. we
Right.
keep we keep increasing the level at which we think the cap is going to be, because we want to get real great at where we are right now,
Yeah.
and own our backyard. And we thought that level was a lot lower than it's turned out to be, and so we keep finding more opportunity within where we are. So we want to get great at that and continue to fine tune our process before we go chase anywhere else. But yeah, we're looking at expansion, whatever that looks like next year.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you're excited. You got plenty in front of you to tackle. But we can't forget your other job role. You're the host and have your own podcast of Crow Knows.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how that came apart, where people can find it, and kind of the discussions you have on there.
Yeah.
Would love to know a little bit more about that project.
Yeah, so that's a fun one. I actually, back in college, had my own, and I think enough time has passed that I don't even think that version of the internet exists anymore, but I'm sure somebody could dig it up. But I used to have a reality TV blog, like sports and reality TV blog. Um,
Seriously. Oh, I'm gonna
yeah, I
find it.
even, like, when I was in middle school, I wrote for a football website,
Okay.
draft websites. I was just always obsessed with it. And
Yeah.
so I used something called Blog Talk Radio that I can't even imagine exists anymore for my podcast back in college, where you just talk for free, you just call in. The quality was terrible.
If
It's a
anyone can
lot easier.
find this, send it to me.
Yeah.
We need this.
Quite a bit easier now, but yeah. I mean, last year we were. my brother-in-law owns a phenomenal company called Market Scale. It's
Mhm.
one of the best companies here in Dallas. They're specialized in user-generated content, and they host a lot of podcasts. And he said, because we'd always talk about all random things like sports, travel,
Yeah.
hospitality, things like that. And he said, why don't we just put a show together for you to host? And so we called it Crow Knows, which is a nod to Bo Knows, the great Bo Jackson marketing campaign, because I've always said I'm a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes
Yeah.
to random knowledge. And so it's been fun, man. I try to bring on great leaders in
Yeah.
sports and hospitality and travel and
Just
things
all
like
the things
that,
you
food
love.
and
Yeah.
beverage. Yeah, got very very fortunate to we had Lee Steinberg on a couple weeks ago, which was
Wow.
talk about an honor to be able to talk to him, but really just get to have conversations with cool people. Had Suresh on,
Yeah.
a member of the 1911 group, and we got to talk about
He's great.
what he's doing at Jets MRO. And we I I selfishly talk to people in areas that I like talking about, so we do a lot of private
No,
aviation
that's
stuff
fun.
just because I
That's
love
the
doing
fun of
it
it
and
all.
talking about it. So, yeah, it's just a fun thing to do on the
A
side,
good thing,
man,
yeah.
and have some cool conversations with people.
And we everyone can find it on, I know you post on LinkedIn, but Apple, Spotify,
Yeah,
YouTube, all that stuff?
Spotify, Market Scale's website as well, just
Okay.
Chronos podcast, and yeah, there's usually some cool stuff in here. Billy Embody was on last year, another 1911 group member, and a recent stories
Oh my god,
on there. So
you guys must have geeked out on some sports,
we
media
did,
and
man.
sports trivia.
Billy's a
That
great
must
friend, and I love seeing what he's done with
so
on
cool.
three has been so
Yeah.
cool.
So cool. Well, AJ, you're the man. We're excited to get this out for everyone to hear and support you, and really proud of everything you've done, and excited to see it grow and have you back on, and whether it's next year or further down the line, and see where you've taken uh, OPW and who knows what else you've got cooking at that point. So thanks for
Yeah.
giving me this hour, and we'll talk soon.
No, I appreciate it. OPWsolutions.com. Again, anything you guys need, exterior work, Oklahoma, DFW, and really anywhere. Even if you're not in one of those areas, give us a call. We can set you up with the right people. We've got a long, huge vendor book of partners that we can help with. So, Instagram, LinkedIn, Instagram and X, we're on OPW Solutions. We try to post some cool risk inspection type stuff on there too. So,
Cool.
thank you for having me, man. This has been a lot of
Of course,
fun,
this has been fun.
and it's been really cool watching the growth that the 1911 group has had, and doing this series is a really cool way to get to know people that we may not be able to interact with face to face,
I appreciate it.
and see everybody's stories. So
That's the
hope
goal.
somebody was able to take something away from this, whatever that may be. But
No,
thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
of course. Yeah, AJ, we'll talk to you soon. See you, buddy. Thank you to our incredible sponsors, Security National Bank, Hilltop Property Tax, Mignon Steakhouse, Sound of a Rose Podcast, and the SMU Cox School of Business for making this all possible.